on holographic computers. A holographic computer is nothing more than an artificial brain that operates in exactly the same way as a biological brain. And if people believe that there is an all-powerful God waiting for them in heaven and that sin exists, they will never be able to understand a starship. I feel that starships are even more powerful because they do not carry psychological traumas or shadows. Nothing limits them. They are not manipulated. Is that correct? What limits you as a being with an unconscious mind is bypassed by a starship. You think something, and the starship does it for you. It takes you there because since you are inside the starship and inside its toroid, you are part of the starship itself. Wow, they are like a pure extension of your own consciousness? Yes, exactly. The 2% of you asks for something, and the starship carries it out with its 100%, using an engine with several TeV of power. It does the same thing your physical body does, only at an immense voltage. And does it carry with it everyone who is on board? What if they want to manifest something else? Does the starship only listen to its owner? It only listens to its owner. But if there is an internal dispute, it will stop and ask, what is going on with you? The starship not only amplifies your thoughts and what you desire, it is also conscious and is a person. I see. That is why I'm asking about the inner shadows, whether the starship can read it. It knows how to distinguish. Another point, a starship cannot manifest living things or living people, although, strictly speaking, it can bring a person back from death, but that is because it retrieves the person from an alternate timeline. One more thing, can this type of interface exist only with the starship or with any technological object? With a bicycle as well? A bicycle has no way to read you. That is what I mean. What other mechanisms can read you? Only starships? You need a very advanced and powerful holographic quantum computer and full toroidal engines. Can you install them in a house and have an interface with your house? Things like that? Here, other devices read the mind because they are connected to the main computer. It is not as though the kitchen blender can read your mind. If you tell it what to do mentally, it is through the starship's computer, which is interconnected. Is it just ships that do that? Or you can construct this technology at home too? Because what if someone doesn't have the ship to which connect? Someone in their home cannot easily build a holographic nanoparticle accelerator computer brain from scratch. That is over-the-top, ultra-high technology. To replicate such a brain exceeds the capacity of even the very best of our home replicator machines. But as our society is completely open to all citizens, if someone would want to improve or use such an electronic brain, he or she can seek assistance and be given the so-called motherboard, using human terms for digital computer brains. Then, with the main brain in hand, someone can construct whatever they want and use that brain as the main control system of their new mechanism. Of course, that person would need high knowledge of holographic quantum electronics and interfaces. Your imagination is the limit. So the ship is not the only construct machine that can house the system. Houses back home can be very simple and rustic. Just out of curiosity, if you have it at home or link it, interface with it, you set it up at home, can you still travel through time and space? If so, the whole house would be taken to wherever? I mean, how much does it occupy, spatially, this technology? The motherboard, computers, etc. Everything to make it work. Oh, for example, Everyone has a holographic computer at home, unless he or she doesn't want to, and many prefer not to. This means that from home you can use full immersion programs or access the knowledge of the entire civilization and of the other civilizations who are friendly and are part of the same information network, Federation races mostly, like in a huge stellar internet. But the house itself does not fly. The motherboard comes in many sizes. A household motherboard computer is the size of a laptop computer. But on the other hand, the brain of a starship like this one takes a whole deck full of computer brains. So, in other words, it must be on a ship. The ship, as it goes far, it must have full independence from the net. She must think on her own and hold all the stellar information while she is away. That ship, can anyone have it? Can personal ships have this technology on board? They do, but they are mostly dependent on net connection, while large ones, like a fighter class, even more a large cruiser like this one, does hold a much more complicated and advanced electronic brain. But if it has that ability to travel through time using frequencies maps, this only is accessible to sand clock pilots, right? Not to any TAYGETAN with a ship. Time travel is not difficult once you have the understanding and the technology. The problem is that if anyone with low ethics jumps in time, the consequences to his or her life can be grave. It's not the technology what sets sand clock pilots aside from the rest. It's who they are inside as people, their training, experience, and ethics. So, in other words, this technology is not provided for everyone to have on their personal ships. What if they know how to build it and construct it anyway, in secrecy? The technology is available to all the people, but they know it's dangerous, and they don't use it to time jump. It's like playing with a rattlesnake. How do you involve your consciousness in the process of travel? Because you are the one who controls the consciousness of the starship, since it goes and does what you command it to do. So it's not a matter of entering data into the starship's computer. Is it purely through consciousness? Yes, but you can do it mentally or by typing. The starship's computer reads your thoughts and your desires. It executes them. How does it do that? That is another topic, truly quantum computing. Wow, excellent. And does only the starship read them? Or does any device you have do so? For example, refrigerators and so on? Do they also operate through consciousness? Everything here works that way, even the starship's kitchen. However, here we return to simplicity again, and we do not deify technology. Therefore, although it is possible, and we do have devices that read the mind, at home we prefer to do things manually, giving maximum importance and value to craftsmanship and simplicity. On Earth, at times, there are clear advances in technology. We do not see it that way, but I know that people there perceive it in this manner. They therefore see technological advancement as constant and linear, moving from the simple to the complex. Here there is no such thing. We have literally had thousands of years in which the technological devices we use have already reached their perfection. After all, there are only so many things one can do with a coffee maker. Therefore, we simply focus on making things last. We do not have those clear advances. Everything already exists and is already perfect, technologically speaking. When you try to force greater perfection, you end up destroying the object. An example of this is automobiles, which in the past years served to go from point A to point B. or to be enjoyed as creative art. Today, however, they are over-technologized. I mean that before, they were simple to repair and maintain. Today they are not. You do not need 100 computers in a car, as many modern Mercedes vehicles have, merely to go to the supermarket to buy lettuce.
For stellar navigation, is it very important to be in a high density in order to manifest certain routes? So, are we in some way limited in traveling to certain places by our consciousness?
Once the technology is in one's hands, that is, once one has a starship, it no longer matters which density one wishes to go to. With the starship, those limits are transcended. The very ability to understand these data at the level required to make them function by giving the correct instructions to a starship goes hand in hand with higher consciousness. One no longer thinks mentally in terms of concepts such as here and there, at such and such a distance, and at such and such a speed. Instead, one must think only in terms of frequencies, as though it were a different language.
You can only introduce inanimate objects into a scene from zero, right? The other way would be transporting objects or beings from one point and manifesting them in another.
We would not use this for living beings. We would use it only for inanimate objects. For living beings, we would use portals. With a portal, we can also insert an object that was here and place it there. However, with the technology we have already described, it is possible to create an object from nothing, or more precisely, from potential energy, designed by computer and insert it into another location, thereby making it real. One would also have to define what is considered an inanimate object and what is not. Stones, I imagine, are not. Bacteria are. But there are things that seem to belong to both worlds. They do not move, yet they are alive in some way. Correct. For example, humans do not consider quartz crystals to be animate or alive, but we do. Quartz crystals do not move through the traditional means one would expect, such as legs. However, they are masters at moving frequencies in such a way that someone moves them exactly where they want to go, and they do this consciously. I also feel that they are living beings. But plastic, I imagine that everything that appears on its own is animate. Plastic, for example, has a high content of planetary black goo, which is a conscious mineral, as we have already said. But it is contaminated with many other chemical compounds. In itself, this angers it, which explains many of the negative effects of plastic. For anything that already exists, whether it is considered alive or not, it is better and faster to use portals. The insertion method described in the article is used for creating new things within an already existing world.
What is the difference between a ship with artificial intelligence and a ship with consciousness, an organic ship? I understand that these are built in space using harmonic sounds and some type of frequency that adapts to the crew. Do you know anything about this?
Of course. There are starships that are made entirely through genetic engineering. Many of them look like marine beings, like a kind of squid, and they also function or move in that way. Many are already considered living species independent of their creators. However, it must be recognized here that every single species that exists is created and is not the product of Darwinian evolution. I am not referring to creationism by a divine being, such as a god or goddess. It is something much more complex. However, if I discuss that, I will be moving away from the topic. Building it with harmonic sounds, I would not define it that way. Building something with harmonic sounds is part of a more complex creative process. It is not an isolated act. I have extensive experience with this subject. Frequency that adapts to the crew. Everything in this universe is frequency. Everything functions in this way, adapting to the frequency of those with whom it interacts. Even our starships are different, but they possess a consciousness of being. They are respected as persons and evolve through experience like any other being, although they still appear to be what one might call classical starships. Even so, TAYGETAN technology is at the forefront, at least in this sector. The entire interface between the pilot, the crew, and the starship is mental, although the starships still retain more conventional elements, such as manual controls, including the widely used joystick. Because they are conscious, our starships also have the capacity, although not completely, to repair themselves, for example, after sustaining damage to the hull. This is done through the use of polymorphic metals and alloys controlled by the central computer, using a holographic energy matrix imposed electromagnetically onto that polymorphic metal.
Wow, how interesting, Swaruu. Thank you very much. Are you capable of building a ship all by yourself?
Yes, and I have already done it. I have also extensively modified my starship, Susie, designed new ones, among other things.
How lucky you are. If I had your knowledge, I would create one for myself.
It is not a matter of luck, it is a matter of study. This is what happened. I enlisted as a fighter pilot. Later, because of my abilities, I was moved to what could be translated as temporal command, which accepts only the best fighter pilots of TAYGETAN. There, one studies how to fly starships with the intention of altering timelines for strategic reasons. I must clarify something else here. All of us use terms such as fightercraft or command. However, to some extent, we are humanizing the limited translation we are able to produce from TAYGETAN. In other words, we adapt certain concepts into the closest possible human equivalent. Having been in that temporal command, I have jumped timelines so many times that I can no longer count them. They are recorded only in the files of Susie's AI mind. That is why I have accumulated so many years.
Wow. Tell me a little bit about the accident in which you lost your life.
Okay, it has to do with reincarnation and how it functions from our perspective. It was late 2016, and during that year, World War III was stopped at least 3 times. At that time, I did not know what I know today about time and timelines. As one of the 2 fighter pilots with temporal knowledge, we had an hourglass painted on the left side of our cockpit as an emblem. I was assigned the task of finding a way to move all of Earth's timelines toward a positive future, all of them, as a block. To do this, it would be necessary to go to the base of the timelines, or the 0 point. With the additional information given to us by a very controversial person, that Swaruu took the starship Susie to the energetic coordinates, so to speak 0000, or the base, which is also considered to be nothingness. This is also, or is connected with, spirituality in meditation, no mind, the void. This is the equivalent of seeking spiritual enlightenment with a starship. In more human terms, this creates a singularity, and it becomes very difficult for a starship to escape from there. This caused an overload in Susie's reactors and engines, resulting in an explosion.